The cold wind of Winterfell blew stronger than ever. The banners of House Stark flew high, but the land was not at peace. War had changed everything, and the North was watching two wolves now, not just one. Robb Stark, the young wolf, had been crowned king in the North. But far beyond the wall, Jon Snow had faced things no one in the Seven Kingdoms could imagine. He had returned, not as a bastard boy of Winterfell, but as a leader, a fighter, a man who had looked death in the eyes and survived. When Jon finally rode into Winterfell, the people came out to see him. They remembered the quiet boy with the long face and soft voice. But this Jon was different. His eyes had seen too much. His voice was firm, his presence heavy, and his dire wolf ghost walked beside him like a silent shadow. He didn't come as a guest. He didn't bow. He walked into the great hall like it belonged to him. Robb sat at the high table, Queenly Talisa beside him, bannermen around. He stood when Jon came in, smiling. "Brother," he said warmly, "you've returned to us. The North remembers." But Jon didn't smile back. "I'm not here to remember, Robb," he said quietly. "I'm here to challenge." The hall fell silent. Men looked at each other, unsure if they heard right. Even Ghost growled low. Robb's face changed. His eyes narrowed. "Challenge? Challenge what?" Jon stepped forward, removing his black cloak. "You sit on the northern throne as king, but you left the wall when the real war was coming. I faced it. I led men. I lost men. I fought for the living. And I say this, the North needs a leader who understands what's coming." Robb stood slowly. "You're my brother. You're not my king," Talisa gasped. Lady Mormont stood up, her little fists clenched. Lord Umber shifted in his chair. Some looked confused, others curious. Robb clenched his jaw. "You swore an oath to the Night's Watch," Jon nodded. "I died. My oath died with me. It was true and strange, and no one could deny it." The silence stretched. Robb took a deep breath. "You're calling for war, Jon. I'm calling for truth. Let the North decide who should lead it. You or me." And with that, the seeds of a civil storm were planted in the frozen soil of Winterfell. Two wolves, once brothers, now rivals. That night, Winterfell didn't sleep. The fires in the great hall burned longer than usual. The lords sat in small groups, whispering over wine and meat, glancing toward the high table where Robb sat silently, his fingers gripping his cup so tightly his knuckles turned white. Talisa tried to speak to him, but he barely heard her. His thoughts were somewhere else, somewhere darker. In the courtyard below, Jon stood alone, his hand resting on Ghost's thick fur. Snowflakes melted on his cloak, but he didn't move. He was watching the castle walls, listening to the wind as if it carried voices from the past. Ned Stark's voice, Ygritte's voice, even Sam's. He didn't want to challenge Robb, not like this. But things were different now. The North couldn't afford to play at thrones and titles. The White Walkers were real. The Night King was real. And if the North followed the wrong leader, they would all die. Robb included. Behind him, footsteps approached. Jon turned to see Lady Lyanna Mormont standing straight and strong, despite her small size. "You have courage, Lord Snow," she said, voice sharp. "Or madness," Jon gave a small nod. "Maybe both." She studied him with her sharp, bear-like eyes. "The North loves Robb. He's won battles. He's their king." Jon looked at her. "And how many of those battles were against the dead?" That made her pause. "You speak of shadows and ice demons," she said, folding her arms. "Things most here have never seen. Why should they believe you?" He didn't answer with words. He pulled down the glove on his left hand. It was still rough, but there were clear signs. Purple veins, pale scars, remnants from when he'd been killed and brought back. Not many knew about that. He never spoke of it unless he had to. Her eyes widened. "I'm not asking them to believe stories," Jon said. "I'm asking them to survive." The next morning, banners rose on both sides. House Stark's direwolf still flew over Winterfell, but another banner, plain black, bearing a white wolf, hung outside the old broken watchtower. It was Jon's camp. Some men left Winterfell quietly in the night and joined him. Veterans from the wall, wildlings who followed him beyond the wall, even some northern soldiers who remembered Jon as Lord Commander and trusted his judgment more than a crown. Inside Winterfell, the mood was strange. Some people avoided speaking at all. Others murmured curses, unsure who to support. Robb called a council in the great hall. "The North cannot afford a civil war," he said to his bannermen. "We have enemies all around, Lannisters, Boltons, Ironborn. Now my brother wants to split us from within." Lord Glover leaned forward. "He's no longer a brother if he comes with war, my king." But Sir Roderick Cassel, old and slow now, cleared his throat. "He's still Ned Stark's son in many eyes. And he speaks truth. He's faced the darkness beyond the wall. We cannot ignore that." "He calls me unworthy," Robb snapped. "He says I ran from the real war. But I fought and bled for the North. No one doubted that. But the room stayed quiet. Outside the walls, Jon prepared too. He didn't want bloodshed. He hoped Robb would listen. But if Robb forced his hand, he would not hold back. Tormund Giantsbane rode into camp that evening with a wild grin. "Never thought I'd see the day when a bastard fights a king," he chuckled. "You got big stones, Snow." Jon didn't laugh. Tormund looked at him seriously. "You sure about this?" "He's your kin." Jon looked toward Winterfell's towers, eyes distant. "I don't want to be king, but I can't let someone sit that throne if he's blind to what's coming." That night they met one last time. No guards, no swords. Just Robb and Jon, standing on the snow-covered bridge outside the Godswood. The heart tree watched them in silence, its red leaves trembling in the wind. "You really want to do this?" Robb asked quietly. "I don't want to," Jon said. "But I must." Robb's jaw tensed. "You think I can't lead?" "I think you haven't seen what I've seen," Jon replied. Robb stepped forward. "You think I'm some spoiled lordling who plays at war? I lost father. I lost our mother. I fought in the Riverlands, led men, buried friends. You think I don't understand pain?" "I know you do," Jon said. "But this is different. The war beyond the wall is not like the ones you've fought. There's no glory in it, only death. Cold, endless death." Robb looked away, the snow falling between them. "Then why not serve beside me?" he asked. "Help me rule." "Because it's not about who rules," Jon said. "It's about who listens. And you haven't listened." The silence stretched between them like a crack in the ice. Then Robb nodded slowly. "Then may the old gods judge us both." Without another word, they turned away. By dawn, the drums of war echoed through the north. Two armies stood at opposite ends of Winterfell's fields. The sky was grey, heavy with snow. The people of the north stood on edge, torn between blood and loyalty, truth and tradition. Two sons of Ned Stark, one crown, and in the middle of it all, Winterfell waited to see which wolf would rule the pack. The sky above Winterfell hung low and heavy, full of snow that refused to fall. The wind was sharp, biting through leather and fur. Men stood in rows on both sides of the field, still, silent, waiting for the first move. On one end flew the direwolf of House Stark. On the other, a plain black banner with a white wolf's head. Jon Snow's mark, stitched by wildling hands. Rough and proud, Jon stood at the front of his line, Ghost beside him. He wore no crown, no shining armor. Just the black of the Night's Watch, layered with northern furs. His sword, Longclaw, rested on his hip. His breath fogged in the air, but his voice was steady. "I don't want this," he told the men behind him, loud enough to be heard. "But I won't kneel to a crown if it means ignoring the real war. If we must fight to make them listen, then so be it. But let no man raise a blade today unless he believes in the fight. You don't fight for me. You fight for the North." Tormund thumped his chest. "Damn right we do." The men around him nodded. These weren't southern-trained knights or polished soldiers. They were wildlings, free folk, Night's Watch brothers, and a few northern lords who had thrown off tradition. They followed Jon not because of his name, but because of what they'd seen in his eyes, the weight of truth. On the other side, Robb sat on his horse, grey cloak flapping behind him. Grey Wind, his direwolf, paced like a ghost among the northern soldiers. They were dressed better, cleaner, sharper. Knights from Carhold, men from Deepwood Mortar, Umber Bannerman, all standing behind their young king, still loyal, still proud. Robb raised his sword high. "We do not fight our kin gladly," he shouted. "But we do not let traitors divide the North. Jon Snow wants the throne, but he does not understand what it means to rule. I did not choose this battle, but I will not run from it. Not today. The horns sounded once, a long, mournful note, then silence. No charge, no screaming, just silence, because both sides hesitated. Nobody wanted to be the first to kill a Stark, and yet the lines slowly began to move. Not fast, not wild, but with grim steps, like men walking into a blizzard. Then something unexpected. A lone rider broke the tension, galloping from the woods behind Jon's line. He rode hard, a raven-black cloak flying behind him, holding a scroll high in his hand. "Stop!" he yelled. "By order of the Citadel and the Crown, stop this madness." Jon frowned. Robb's horse snorted and shifted. The rider slowed and reached Jon first, handing him the scroll. Jon opened it, eyes scanning fast. Then his hand tightened. Robb rode forward. "What is this?" The rider turned to him. "A raven from Old Town. The maesters have sent word. News from King's Landing." Jon looked up at Robb, voice flat. "Cersei is dead. The Red Keep has fallen. Daenerys Targaryen has taken the capital." A long silence. The field shifted again, like ice cracking beneath their feet. Robb blinked. "The Dragon Queen?" Jon nodded. "And she's marching north. She brings Unsullied. And 2 dragons." Murmurs passed through both armies like wildfire. Robb looked at his brother, his grip loosening on his sword. "So, the war is coming to us anyway." Jon's face was unreadable. "And we're standing here ready to kill each other while the real enemy marches." Tormund chuckled darkly. "Told you. Stupid southern wars always find their way up here." Some men started to step back. Others sheathed their swords. It was like waking from a dream or a nightmare. Then someone else came forward. Lady Brienne of Tarth, now wearing the cloak of a northern guard, rode between both sides, raising her voice. "The North will not survive divided. If the Dragon Queen comes, she'll demand loyalty. And if she doesn't get it, fire will follow." Jon looked at Robb. "You think she'll bend the knee to you?" Robb shook his head. "She won't, and neither will I." The tension began to rise again, but this time not between Jon and Robb, between them. And the storm approaching from the south. Jon said softly, "Then we have a bigger problem." That night the field emptied. No blood had been spilled, not yet. Both camps returned to Winterfell. The halls were quiet but uneasy. No songs, no laughter, only hard stares and quiet talks. In the Godswood, Jon sat alone, his hand on the old weirwood tree. The red leaves fluttered softly in the wind. Robb approached, not with anger this time, but with something heavier. "We were ready to kill each other," he said. Jon nodded. "We still might, but not today." Robb leaned against the old stone wall, looking up at the pale moon. "She's coming, Jon, the Dragon Queen. If she's like her father." Jon looked over. "She's not. But she can become him if we push her," Robb sighed. "Then what do we do?" Jon stood slowly. "We face her, together, as Starks." Robb looked at him. "And the crown?" Jon shook his head. "Let the gods decide when this is all over. But for now, I don't care who sits on the throne. I care who survives to see it." And for the first time in days, Robb smiled. A tired smile. A real one. "All right then, brother. Let's prepare for dragons." The air around Winterfell had changed. The snow still fell, the wolves still howled, but there was something heavier now, a weight pressing on the stones of the old castle. Smoke trails curled from the towers, not from hearths, but from the forges. Men worked day and night, sharpening swords, melting iron, reforging armor. For the first time in centuries, Winterfell was preparing not for winter, but for dragons. Jon Snow stood atop the ramparts, watching the southern horizon. His cloak whipped behind him in the wind. Ghost lay at his feet, still as stone. Behind him, the north stirred restlessly. There were whispers in the hallways, about the Dragon Queen, about what she might demand, about whether she would burn Winterfell to ash. Robb Stark was no longer calling councils in the Great Hall. Instead, he and Jon met privately now, late at night, away from ears, trying to shape the North into something stronger before the fire came. Their rivalry hadn't vanished, just paused. Their conversations were sharp, quick, careful. Brothers walking a narrow line, She'll want us to kneel, Robb said during one such meeting, arms crossed. She'll bring her dragons to remind us. Jon nodded. She doesn't trust Easy. She's lost too much. We have to make her believe we're allies, are we? Robb asked quietly. Jon didn't answer. Neither did Robb. Outside the castle, the people of the north prepared in their own way. Wildlings trained beside northern farmers. Blacksmiths reforged old swords passed down for generations. Children were taught how to hide, how to run, how to survive. The old stories of dragons had returned, whispered like ghost tales beside the fire. 3 days later, the dragons came. They weren't announced. No horns, no riders galloping ahead, just shadows in the sky, massive, terrifying, like 2 black storms with wings. They flew over the trees without sound, circling Winterfell once before landing just beyond the gates. The ground shook as their claws hit earth. Their wings folded like ancient sails, their yellow eyes glowing in the cold northern sun. The north had seen death before, but never power like this. Jon stepped forward from the gates, not with a sword but with open hands. Robb stood beside him, jaw tight. Daenerys Targaryen rode between her dragons, flanked by Unsullied on both sides. She wore black and silver, her hair braided in Valyrian style. She was not smiling. Her eyes moved between the 2 men in front of her. Her voice was calm but sharp as frost. You raised arms against each other, she said. Now you expect me to trust you with my war? Robb stepped forward. We've settled that matter, she raised an eyebrow. Have you? Jon spoke. We stood ready to fight, but no blood was spilled, because we realized we were wasting time. You're here now, which means time is over. She stared at him a long moment. Then she dismounted slowly, looking around at the northern faces watching from behind the walls. Suspicion, fear, hate. It was clear in their eyes. You're not welcome here, she said flatly. But I didn't come for welcome. I came for survival. Then we understand each other, Jon said. Inside the hall, the fire crackled as Jon, Robb, and Daenerys sat around the table Ned Stark had once ruled from. Missandei and Tyrion stood behind Daenerys. Grey Worm waited silently outside. I came north to ask for loyalty, Daenerys began, her eyes on Robb. You declared yourself king. That crown belongs to me. Robb didn't flinch. We bled for that crown. We lost half the north fighting the south. Now you expect us to hand it over because you have dragons. No, Daenerys said. I expect you to hand it over because I am the dragon. Jon stepped between them with his voice low. If we fight each other, the Night King wins. That's it. No thrones, no crowns, no future, Tyrion finally spoke. What do you propose, Jon? You speak like a man with a plan. Jon looked between Daenerys and Robb, a temporary alliance. We fight the dead together. Whoever lives through that can talk about thrones after. Daenerys crossed her arms. And who leads the armies? Jon took a breath. I will. I've seen the Night King. I've fought him. My men know how to face the dead. Robb leaned back. You'll lead my army? Jon nodded. You trust me or you don't? Robb stared at him long and hard, then nodded. Once Daenerys looked less pleased. And what of me? Jon met her gaze. You command your dragons. No one else can. But let me lead the charge. You'll see why. Outside, the snow began to fall heavier. But for the first time, the North's 3 powers, Stark, Snow, and Stormborn, were under one roof. Not in peace, but not yet in war. Later that night, as Jon stood on the ramparts again, Daenerys came to him quietly. She didn't speak for a long time. Just watched the snow fall beside him. You looked different when I saw you in Dragonstone, she said finally. I was a different man. She studied him. Robb doesn't trust me. He shouldn't, Jon said. Not yet, she turned sharply. And do you? Jon looked her in the eye. I trust your fire. I just hope it doesn't burn us all. The dead came without sound. No horns, no drums, no warnings. Only a wall of darkness crawling across the snow, blotting out the horizon with their numbers. Skeletons, wights, corpses of men, women, children, all reanimated by the Night King's will. Their eyes glowed blue like cold fire. They moved like one beast, silent but unstoppable, devouring the land with every step. From atop Winterfell's walls, Jon Snow watched them come. He felt no fear now, only urgency. They were here, and there was no time left. The war he had warned about, the one that had cost him friends, love, and even his own life, it had arrived. Inside the castle, every corner had been transformed into a war machine. Wildlings stood beside northern lords. Black brothers handed weapons to women. Maesters carried crates of dragon glass, handing out obsidian-tipped spears and axes. Even the children had been trained to hide in tunnels and cellars. No one would be spared. Not this time. Robb Stark stood in the great hall, his armor silver and grey, the direwolf crest glinting under torchlight. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm behind them. He was used to battle. But this wasn't war. This was extinction. Daenerys stood beside the long fire pit, her silver hair loose, her expression unreadable. She had fought many battles, burned many cities. But she had never fought death itself. "Where is the Night King?" she asked Jon when he entered. "Somewhere behind the lines," Jon said. "He won't come first. He wants us to break, to lose hope." Tyrion stood in the corner, sipping wine with shaking hands. "How comforting!" Jon looked at the two of them. "We don't need to kill them all, just him. Kill the Night King and the rest fall." Easier said than done. Outside, the horns blew. The dead had reached the outer trench, a ring of fire designed to keep them back. Archers let loose arrows soaked in pitch and flame. Fire blazed across the trenches, lighting up the night like a second sun. For a moment it worked. The dead hesitated, then they threw themselves into the fire. One by one, they fell into the flames, building a bridge of burning corpses. And the others walked across, unaffected by pain or fear. Jon was on the ramparts within seconds, sword drawn, barking orders. "Hold the walls! Light every barrel of wildfire. Don't let them climb!" Below, the chaos exploded. The undead hit the walls like a tidal wave. Grappling claws, rotting hands. Some climbed, others leapt, others threw themselves forward just to become a step for those behind. Robb fought like a northern storm. Grey wind leapt beside him, tearing through whites with savage fury. Jon moved like a shadow, Longclaw slicing through limbs and heads. His black cloak soaked in ash and blood. Brienne, Podrick and Tormund held the eastern wall, dragging survivors back and killing anything that moved. Sam fought clumsily but bravely, staying behind Jon as best he could. In the skies, Daenerys mounted Drogon. Rhaegal flew beside her, no rider this time, only instinct. She gave no speeches, no threats. She simply said, "Dracarys," and the world turned to fire. Flames washed over the dead, burning rows and rows of them to ash. Screams, inhuman and sharp, filled the air. For a moment hope returned. The fire worked. The dragons were doing what no sword could. But then, the storm came, a sudden gust of wind, clouds blacker than night, a blizzard that swallowed the dragon's fire. The Night King had arrived, riding Viserion, the undead dragon, blue flames pouring from its throat. He came not as a warrior, but as death itself. Rhaegal met him in the skies. The two dragons collided with a roar that split the heavens. Ice against flame, life against death. Jon saw it from below, heart pounding. He turned to Robb. "Hold the gate. I'm going for him." Robb grabbed his arm. "Don't be a fool." "I have to. It ends with him." Jon leapt onto a horse, Ghost following close behind, and disappeared into the chaos of the battlefield. Meanwhile, Robb turned back to the walls just in time to see them break. A section of Winterfell's outer wall crumbled under the pressure of the dead. The trench gave way. Whites poured through like floodwater. The living were pushed back into the inner courtyard. Screams echoed through the stone halls. Every corner of Winterfell became a battleground. Fire flickered and died. Smoke blinded the archers. The sky was choked with ash and snow. Tyrion and Sansa led the children and non-fighters into the crypts. The safest place, they thought. But even the dead in the crypts began to stir. Bones rattled, tombs cracked. An old Stark woman burst from her stone tomb, shrieking. Chaos broke loose in the shadows. Sansa screamed. Tyrion drew a dagger. Gilly grabbed her son and ran. Up above, Daenerys was thrown from Drogon as Viserion slammed into the beast. She hit the snow hard, bleeding from the head. Whites began to close in, but Jorah came, sword flashing, shield raised, no hesitation. He died protecting her, falling to his knees with one final breath. Daenerys sobbed over his body, but stood. The Dragon Queen still had fire in her. Meanwhile, in the woods beyond the battle, Jon reached the Godswood. The Night King was there waiting, no words, no fear, just blue eyes and cold silence. Jon raised Longclaw. The Night King raised his blade. Steel met ice in the ancient grove of the old gods, and somewhere deep inside Winterfell, Robb Stark, bloodied and outnumbered, held the last gate. As the dead poured in, he whispered one word, "Jon, it's on you now." The Godswood had never known such silence. The ancient trees stood tall, their red leaves trembling like they could feel what was coming. Beneath the weirwood's bleeding face, Jon Snow and the Night King faced each other, two figures from opposite worlds, one born of man, the other forged by ice and dark magic. Jon's breath steamed in the freezing air. Longclaw felt heavy in his hands, not from fear, but from everything riding on this single moment. The Night King moved first, silent, smooth, fast. Jon barely blocked the first blow. Their blades clashed with a sound like ice cracking across a lake. Sparks flew. Jon ducked, stepped to the side, countered. But the Night King was fast, too fast for something that wasn't alive. His sword sang through the air with the grace of a dancer and the force of a hammer. They fought among the roots of the old gods, slipping in the snow, smashing branches, circling each other like predators. Jon's arm burned from the effort. His ribs ached. Blood trickled down his brow, and then the Night King knocked Longclaw from his hands. The sword landed in the snow several feet away. The cold was deafening. Ghost growled nearby, but was trapped behind a wall of whites, fighting his way toward Jon. The Night King raised his blade slowly, his blue eyes staring into Jon's soul. But he wasn't rushing. He was enjoying it, as if killing Jon was a message, a final punishment. Then, a flash of silver, a blur in the trees. Arya. She flew through the air like a shadow, Valyrian steel dagger in hand, aimed straight at the Night King's back. He turned, just in time, grabbed her by the throat, but Arya dropped the daggers and caught it with her other hand, just like before, and drove it deep into his chest. For a moment, nothing. Then cracks spread from the blade. Blue light burst through the Night King's chest like shattered glass. His mouth opened, but no sound came, and then he exploded into ice and wind. The whites collapsed, all of them, one by one, falling like puppets whose strings had been cut. Jon dropped to his knees in the snow. Gasping for breath, Arya stood above him, shaking, her face pale, her hands bloody. "It's done," she whispered. But it wasn't done, not yet. Back in Winterfell, the chaos had not stopped. Even as the dead fell, the living kept fighting. Confusion, fear, anger. In the crypts, survivors emerged into the smoky air. On the battlefield, wounded were being pulled from the mud. Robb Stark stood against the wall, sword bloody, breathing hard. The last gate had held, just barely. He looked up and saw the whites falling around him. "Jon," he muttered. He did it. Then came the second storm. Viserion, the undead dragon, was still in the sky, uncontrolled, riderless. With the Night King gone, it had gone mad. It breathed blue fire without aim, its screams shaking the stars. One blast hit the western tower. Stone exploded. Flames raged. Screams echoed through the keep. Jon rushed back through the broken gate, Arya by his side. They saw the destruction and the chaos it left behind. Daenerys was already climbing onto Drogon, even as the beast growled in pain from earlier wounds. She didn't speak, didn't wait. She flew straight toward Viserion, rising above the clouds, fire in her blood and vengeance in her eyes. The two dragons clashed in the sky above Winterfell like gods warring in the heavens. Viserion breathed his blue fire, missing by inches. Drogon roared and bit into his brother's wing. Jon watched from below, helpless. The dragons tangled, roared, clawed at each other, and then a jet of fire burst through Viserion's neck. Drogon's flame finally broke through the dead creature's ice. Viserion shrieked one final time, then fell, crashed outside the walls of Winterfell. shattering trees and stone. Silence fell again, real silence. The dead were gone. The storm had passed. Winterfell stood, burned, bloodied, but not broken. In the days that followed, they buried the dead. Hundreds of them, more than anyone wanted to count. Men from the north, wildlings, brothers of the Night's Watch, Jorah Mormont, Theon Greyjoy, Lyanna Mormont, Gendry, who fell defending the walls. Even Grey Wind, Robb's dire wolf, who had died beside him in the final charge because Robb had fallen too. Jon found him slumped against the last gate, a spear through his side, blood frozen to his armor. He had held the line until the very end, when the pyres were lit. Jon stood beside Arya and Daenerys, the flames reflected in his eyes, his face unreadable. Inside him, grief and duty warred in silence. Later, in the Godswood, Sansa placed Robb's sword beneath the old tree, beside the roots. "He died a king," she said quietly. Jon looked down. "He died a brother." In the weeks that followed, a council was held in the Great Hall. What was left of it? The North had no king now, no certainty. Daenerys sat at the head of the table, her face tired, her body still healing. The lords of the North sat before her, silent. Jon stood beside her, but not behind her. "You all lost someone," he said, voice steady. "So did I, so did she. But the war isn't over. There are still enemies beyond the sea. Still games being played in the south." Daenerys stood. "I did not come here to conquer the North. I came to save it. But if I am to lead, I must know I am accepted." The room was quiet. Then Lady Mormont's uncle stood. He bowed. "The Dragon Queen saved us. She has my loyalty." Others followed. Not all, but enough. Then all eyes turned to Jon. He stepped forward, looked at Daenerys. "Then at the Lords I was born a bastard," he said. "Raised in a house that wasn't mine. I never wanted a crown. Still don't." He looked at Arya. "At great cost we survived." He paused. "And I think the time for kings and queens has passed. It's time for something better." The room stirred. Daenerys blinked, caught off guard. But Jon only turned to the doors, picked up his sword, and walked out of the hall. Some say he went north of the wall. Others say he never stopped walking. But one thing was certain. Winterfell would remember him, not as a king, but as the wolf who faced the storm and didn't flinch.